September 14th, 1940. Birmingham, England. The city is running on half light and habit. Street lamps, hooded, windows taped in crooked crosses. The air tastes of coal smoke and old brick dust. The kind that settles in your throat and refuses to leave. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, the sirens have already rehearsed their long, rising noton animal warning you, learn to ignore until you can't. And inside one factory, a single mistaker, a single choice could decide who makes it home, because tonight, someone will notice something they were never meant to see. Inside the factory, the world becomes narrower and louder. A line of shell casings, new brass, newly stamped moves along a conveyor like river stones under pressure. Presses slam down with a steady violence. Metal sings. Oil breathes its sharp, dark smell into everything. The floor vibrates so constantly that the body forgets what stillness feels like. She stands at her station with a rag in one hand, her fingers already stained where the cloth can't quite clean. Hair tucked under a scarf, sleeves rolled up, a pencil stub tucked behind her ear like a secret. Every few seconds she reaches out, turns a casing a fraction, checks the rim, checks the mouth, checks the tiny, unforgiving geometry that decides whether a soldier lives through the next minute, not because anyone asked her to, because she can't stop. The men on the floor call it the rhythm, as if the machines are a kind of music. The foreman calls it output, the ministry calls it necessity, and the newspapers call it the people's war, printing. Photographs of smiling women in overalls, as if bravery can be staged, like a poster. It doesn't arrive in the form of a headline. It arrives as absence. In the canteen, women stand with enamel mugs and try not to stare at the notice board. Names appear there in small, official handwriting zunes. Husbands, brothers, some are reported missing. Some I regret to inform. The language is always polite. The grief never is. And lately, the stories that travel back from the front through letters, through whispered conversations with wounded men on leave, through the careful words of a cousin in the home guard carry a different kind of dread. Not just enemy fire, not just the weather, not just fear jams, misfires, a weapon that should have spoken, choking instead on its own breath. She watches the casings roll, watches the inspectors stamp them, watches crates get nailed shut with the speed of men who've learned not to think about where the crates are going. The first sign that the problem is real comes in an object no one wants to touch. It arrives on a rainy afternoon, carried in a battered crate that looks like it has traveled through more places than it should have survived. The delivery man doesn't make jokes. He doesn't flirt like the others do. His face has the drained, gray steadiness of someone who has seen a thing and doesn't know how to unsee it. He leaves the crate in the supervisor's office. At first, the office door stays shut. The foreman and two men from upstairs speak in low voices, as if the metal inside can hear them. As if it is still dangerous, as if the war has followed it into the building and is waiting behind paperwork. Then the door opens, and a smell escapes that does not belong to oil or coal or sweat. Burnt cordite rust. Wet earth, the sour tang of something that has been in the open too long. They carry the contents out wrapped in cloth, not because it is delicate, but because it is shameful. It is not a shell casing like the ones on her line bright, clean, obedient. It is a piece of metal from the front, twisted, peened, scarred. The edges are jagged where they should have been smooth. Something has been forced. Something has seized. Something has cracked under stress that the drawings in London never had to imagine. A tag is tied to it with string. The tag is written in that same neat hand as the casualty lists. Failure in action. It reads, and beneath it, a date, a place, a unit number that means nothing to her until she sees the second line. Weapon Jamunda fire. When it finally reaches her, it is heavier than she expects. It sits in her palms like a dead thing. She turns it slowly, as if reading Braille. Sees where the metal has galled, where two surfaces have ground together until they became one, then tore apart. Sees the faint, almost invisible scoring that suggests misalignment, not dramatic, Not obvious. Just enough. Just enough. Her breathing changes without her noticing. This is not bravery failing. This is not morale. This is not cowardice dressed up in rumor. This is engineering. And engineering, she understands, is not a matter of pride. It is a matter of truth. Metal does not care who designed it. It does not salute. It does not obey rank. It obeys physics, heat, pressure, dirt, time. A line of shell casings keeps moving behind her. Perfect. Relentless. The foreman starts talking again, saying words like isolated incident, like field conditions, like not our department. He speaks with the confidence of someone protected by distance from the front, distance from consequence, distance from the moment when a weapon stutters and a man dies because it did. But she can't unsee what she's holding. She thinks of the tolerances on the drawings she glimpsed once, pinned to a wall like scripter. She thinks of the gauges they use, calibrated in thousandths of an inch, checked and rechecked as if precision alone is virtue. She thinks of mud, sand, the cold bite of dawn, hands that are numb, fear that makes movements clumsy, and she thinks of the simplest, most terrifying possibility, that the war is being fought by people who have never held the failed part in their hands, that the people making decisions are protected by institutions designed to keep them from feeling the weight of their own mistakes. She stands there, a young woman in a factory that smells of oil and smoke, and realizes something that is almost unbearable in its clarity. The assembly line is not separate from the battlefield. It is the battlefield. Outside, the sirens begin, agging long, rising, relentless as if the sky itself is reminding Birmingham that there is no home front. Not really. Only front. She looks down at the mangled metal, at the neat tag tied to it like a small, polite accusation, and in a loud, indifferent churn of the factory, a quiet question forms one that will not leave her alone. If a war can be lost by a fraction of a millimeter, who, exactly, is allowed to fix it? October 3rd, 1940, Smethwick, Works, West Midlands. The rain has been falling long enough to feel permanent. It turns the yard outside the factory into a slick map of puddles, reflecting weak lamps and the hunched silhouettes of brick buildings that seem older than the war itself. In the distance, trains groan along the line, coal, steel, men, everything moving because stopping has become its own kind of death. Inside, the shift bell has already rung. The floor should be emptying. Boots should be retreating down corridors. Cigarettes should be lit with the relief of surviving another day without a bomb choosing your roof. But one light stays on. At the far end of a workbench, beneath a single shaded lamp, she remains, a young woman in a navy overall, headscarf tied tight, pencil stub behind her ear. The factory has quieted enough that she can hear what she usually has to feel. The small ticks of cooling metal, the faint drip of water somewhere in a pipe, the slow sigh of machinery at rest. She spreads a rag across the bench, not to keep it clean, nothing stays clean here, but to make a private world within the grime. On it, she lays out a few things she should not have. Borrowed calipers, a gauge block, a small file dulled by too many desperate hands. And the object that started all of this, the twisted, scarred piece of metal that came back from the front like a confession, it sits on the cloth as if it might stain the air. She doesn't look at it like a mystery. She looks at it like a sentence with missing words. Her fingers trace the scoring again, the faint lines where two surfaces have ground together until they gave up their identities. She angles it toward the light. The lamp's warm glow catches a ridge that shouldn't exist. She begins with what she can measure. The calipers open and close with a soft click. She checks a lip, a channel, a surface that should be smooth but carries microscopic scars like a memory. She compares it to a fresh part from the reject bin waste. The supervisors call it, as if waste has never changed history. She lays them side by side. Too tight, and dirt becomes a wedge. Too loose, and pressure finds an escape. There is a narrow place where everything either works or kills. She sketches on oil-stained paper because clean paper doesn't belong to her world. The pencil drags, leaves dark lines that look like rails. She draws a cross-section, not beautiful, not formal, honest. A shape that accepts reality, and slowly the unseen reveals itself. It isn't one dramatic flaw. It is a chain of small mercies that never arrive. A tolerance too strict, a corner too sharp, a surface finish too rough, a feed angle that doesn't forgive when the mechanism is hot and the operator is shaking. No one mistake, 1,000 tiny assumptions. From the reject bin, she selects pieces that match her mental picture of the failure springs, slightly out of spec. Housings with cosmetic blemishes, a component that was thrown out because it didn't look right. Waste, scrap. The factory's shame. She cleans them the way she cleans her own hands quickly, thoroughly, not perfectly. Then she starts working. A file whispers against metal. A stone smooths a burr down to nothing. She changes an angle so slightly that no one would notice unless they were searching for the reason men die. She polishes a contact surface until it reflects the lamp like water. She adjusts the clearance until it can breathe. Her movements are careful, patient. Not because she is timid, because she cannot afford arrogance. Outside, somewhere beyond the yard, a siren might rise. Tonight it doesn't. The quiet feels borrowed. She pauses to listen anyway. In wartime, silence is never neutral. It is either mercy or an omen. When she's done, she holds the modified component up to the light. It looks almost the same as before. That is the point. Great change rarely announces itself with spectacle. It arrives in tiny differences no one has the imagination to fear. She fits the part into a small bench assembly. She has improvised nothing official, nothing that would survive inspection. Her hands are steady. Her breath is not. This is the moment where Defiance becomes dangerous. If she is caught here after hours, borrowing tools, altering parts, testing an improvement without permission, she won't just be she will be labeled unreliable, difficult. A girl trying to be clever. In 1940, those labels can end a working life as effectively as a bomb. And still, she turns the mechanism. It cycled with a dry, satisfying precision. Again, she introduces grit-fine dust from the floor, the kind that gets everywhere no matter how much you sweep. She heats a piece slightly near the lamp, simulating the expansion that happens after repeated firing. She cycles it again. It doesn't choke. She cycles it faster. It still doesn't choke. For the first time in days, something inside her loosens just enough to let a breath through. Not triumph. Relief. The kind you feel when you've been carrying a weight you weren't meant to carry and suddenly discover it can be moved. But a solution that works in secret is still a secret. And secrets don't save soldiers. The next day, she does what the system demands of her. She tries to bring it forward, not with ego, with evidence. She approaches the foreman when the floor is loud enough to hide the tremor in her voice. She shows him the paper, oil-stained, unpretty, alive. She shows him the small part, the modification so modest it almost looks insulting. She chooses her words carefully. Not, I fixed it. Not, you were wrong. Just, I think this might help. The foreman barely looks. His eyes skim the lines as if reading a joke. His mouth tightens, not in anger, but in dismissalan expression reserved for people who forget their place. He glances at her hands, at the grime under her nails, and his judgment is immediate. This is not his department. This is not her role. Silence at first. Then ridicule, the soft kind that doesn't leave bruises but does leave scars. Leave it to the designers, he says, as if designers are a species and she is not one of them. She returns to her station with the pod in her pocket like a contraband prayer. And then, because wars don't wait for Pradhan, opportunity arrives. A minor stoppage. Another rumor, another crate returned. The supervisors are tense. The upstairs men are visiting again. their shoes too clean for the floor. Someone mutters about a test run, a quick bench trial to reassure the right people that production is under control. The foreman is nervous enough to entertain anything that might make the problem go away. She offers, again, quietly, no defiance in her posture, only inevitability. This time, they let her place the component into the test assembly. Not because they believe in her, because the system is desperate, and desperation sometimes opens doors that justice never will. The trial begins. Metal cycles under controlled conditions. A few observers watch with folded arms, prepared to confirm their assumptions. The machine runs. It doesn't jam. It runs again. It doesn't jam. No applause. No acknowledgement. Only a subtle shift in the room. The kind that happens when reality arrives and nobody knows where to stand. Because the machine doesn't care that she is a factory girl. It never did. The foreman clears his throat. One of the men from upstairs takes notes without looking at her. The part is removed, examined, and quietly set aside as if it might be contagious. And in that small, stolen moment of success, another danger takes shape. Not the enemy, not the bombs. Credit. Because now that the fix exists, it will travel upward, into offices, into memos, into neat handwriting. It will be translated into process improvement language that strips it of the one thing that makes it human, the mind that saw the pattern in the noise. She watches them carry the part away, and she understands the next paradox the war will teach her. Saving lives may be possible. Keeping your name attached to the truth might not be. The factory returns to its rhythm. Presses slam. Brass rolls. Numbers climb. And she stands at her station, hands steady, eyes watching the line with a new, colder clarity. Because she has learned something that will outlast the war in a world that worships rank. The hardest battle is not making something work. It is making the world admit who made it work. March 11th, 1941. Whitehall, London. The morning air over the Thames carries a cold that feels official, sliding between stone buildings and iron railings like paperwork and silence. The kind of decisions that never leave fingerprints. In Whitehall, the war is measured in corridors and folders, not mud and smoke. You can smell ink before you smell fear, and footsteps echo where battles are translated into paper. Inside a government office, a clerk dips his pen and writes numbers that will never be read aloud at a graveside. His ink-stained fingers steady as if grief can be made orderly. A memo lies on a polished desk beneath a shaded lamp-tin, almost weightless yet. It holds the kind of change that shifts a war without anyone noticing the hands that pushed it. 2 hours north by rail at Smethwick Works. She stands under harsh bulbs turning brass, watching, measuring, listening to machines as if they are speaking a truth everyone else refuses to hear. Her hands still carry the same stains, her headscarf still tied tight, the pencil stub still behind her. Here only now, the line runs, and it does not choke. In 1940, they spoke of jams like superstition, field conditions. But by March 1941, the talk on the floor has changed, quieter and less desperate as the numbers begin to tilt. It wasn't dramatic. That was its power, no speech, no uniform, just a file, a caliper, and waste from a reject bin becoming a fix. A bevel softened, a clearance opened barely, a surface finished to forgive dirt and heat. When proof first arrived, there was no applause. The foreman cleared his throat, and the men from upstairs took notes without looking at her, as if looking might admit intelligence can live on the factory floor. After that, the solution began to travel the way power always moves, quietly upward, becoming line items and report phrases like process, refinement, and updated machine guidance, language that makes inventions sound like maintenance. At Smethwick Works, she notices the change before anyone tells her. A foreman from another section passes with a fresh instruction sheet stamped with a new date, and no one says her name. A machinist adjusts a lathe setting and mutters about new guidance, the factory behaving like it has quietly agreed to a new truth without ever naming where it came from. Across the Midlands and the North, men in brown coats arrive with clipboards, measuring output like weather, Speaking carefully as if recording history without wanting responsibility, the proof returns as absence fewer jams reported, fewer stoppage hours logged, less scrap wasted while in the canteen women hold enamel mugs, and the notice board grows more slowly. Not victory, but survival. In London, a senior official reads the updated report and nods once, satisfied, needing only to see the system look competent, not to know who made it so. Somewhere in a records room, papers are filed away under official stamps and someone else's signature. The origin story cleaned until it disappears into a drawer that slides shut without a sound. And back on the line, her oil-stained hands keep turning brass under harsh light while Whitehall's ink keeps moving above it, all two worlds. One victory, and a name that history trained itself not to see.